Klarfeld, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Russell. Good to be here.
Marshall Klarfeld is an ancient aliens researcher and believes that human beings were genetically engineered by an extraterrestrial race called the Anunnaki 250,000 years ago. He is the author of Adam the Missing Link, Gilgamesh 10, and his latest, The Anunnaki Were Here. You can learn more about Marshall Klarfeld by visiting adamthemissinglink.com. Marshall, I recently had Michael Tellinger on the show, where he discussed his discovery of the ruins of the Anunnaki gold mines in South Africa. You believe you have found an Anunnaki gold mining operation in Colorado.
Well, there are two of them in the United States that I researched, Russell. One is the ruins in New Mexico, Chaco Canyon, Pueblo Bonito, and the one in Colorado is Mesa Verde. I've analyzed in my book, The Anunnaki Were Here, were gold mining sites built by the Anunnaki to harvest gold from placer water. Placer water is river water that is stripping gold from the veins upstream and bringing it down in the form of suspended particles. These particles can be separated out, since gold is 19 times heavier than water, by bumping it and collecting it in a washboard fashion. Most of the 49ers who went up to California either used pans or sluice boxes, which had washboard bottoms in them. In the book, I also refer to about 14 other pyramid-type structures like Chichen Itza and Machu Picchu, which were built, I believe, by the Anunnaki to collect the gold from the rivers that were close by. If you were to look at a washboard, you see that the surfaces are irregular, and if the water flows over those irregular surfaces and bumps against the gold, it drops into the slots and is collected later. My newest theory, which is in the fourth book that I'm currently writing, Russell, I've discovered that there was an ancient Greek myth called Jason and the Argonauts, and it was in the pursuit of the golden fleece. And I discovered that golden fleece meant that they took sheepskin and put it in the placer water, and the gold collected in the fleece. And that was where when it turned gold, they took it out, let it dry, and they had the gold. So my assumption is that the fleece of sheep were used on the surfaces, the flat surfaces of these washboard terraces. Like if you look at Machu Picchu from the air, you'll see that it's covered totally with sculptured terraces in all directions. And as the water flowed over these terraces, and if the horizontal surfaces were covered with fleece, the gold would collect on those surfaces and could be easily retrieved. So my theory is going forward with a new twist to it called the golden fleece.
So all ancient pyramids were used to separate the gold from the water?
Not all of them. I can't prove that all of them, but the ones that I picked out, like Planeke, Chichen Itza, the Great Pyramid, and Tiwanaku, there are many sites that I analyzed had placer gold. You have to have the water nearby or you can't do it. The sites that I associated with that, Russell, were in the book, those that had the river water that could be used to separate the gold. And now the Great Pyramid, the Nile River, when it floods, strips gold out of the Nubian mountains where the gold deposits are. That's south of the Mediterranean. The Nile River flows from south to north. And as it passed by the site of the Great Pyramid, the water was diverted into a dam. They actually had a dam around the base of that Great Pyramid, and the water level then could be brought up to the entrance, which is not at ground level. As we know, it's about 36 feet above ground. And once the water was elevated to the entrance, it goes screaming down the 26-angle shaft. There's a 4x4 shaft that's at the entrance, goes down to the pit, which is below the pyramid. This shaft was drilled through solid granite to the pit, and it's watertight. And then there's a pulse generator in the pit that sends the water back up into the Grand Gallery, which is an upside-down washboard, and then up into the King's Chamber. And if you note, as many researchers have, all the chambers in the Great Pyramid and the tunnels are watertight. And there had to be a reason to go to that extra effort to make them watertight. And the evidence that I bring forward in the book, Russell, is that the big stone sarcophagus, which is found in the king's chamber, with nothing in it, of course, there was never found Pharaoh's remains or anything, has got damages on all the outside edges. If you look at it carefully, and I show that in my book with a very clear picture, the damage that occurred to the edges and the top and the bottom and the sides of that was that it floated. When the water came into the king's chamber, that, according to Archimedes' principle, will float. That box will float, and it'll bang randomly around inside the chamber, chipping at the edges. And I think what actually caused it to fail, one corner has been chipped down to the point where the water came into the box and it sunk. That's my analysis of what the original purpose of the Great Pyramid was. It goes against everybody else's theories. I know I'm sticking my neck out on this one, Russell, but I'm pretty much convinced, and I detailed it in the last chapter of the Anunnaki Were Here, how it worked, and I'm challenging the scientific community to prove that I'm wrong.
You're sticking your neck out, as you say, and you consider yourself a disciple of Zecharia Sitchin.
Yes, that is correct.
If I may say, there is no record of Sitchin having anything but a journalism degree. What makes him qualified, and then how does that make you qualified?
Okay, let's talk about what the results of Sitchin's work were first, Russell. Sitchin produced over 15 books, very scholarly books, that have been challenged by many people, but have stood strong, and I stand behind them. And my credentials are that I am a graduate engineer from Caltech, but that doesn't qualify me in ancient history at all. And Sitchin's degrees didn't qualify him either, as did Einstein didn't have qualifications to produce what he produced. So it doesn't take a lot of imagination to understand that people can have insights into history or physics or mathematics without a lot of degrees behind them. Those that have the degrees and claim that they're experts, I question that they aren't just trying to ride on Sitchin's popularity. He's a very popular author, and I, for 60 years after I graduated from Caltech in 1951, was pursuing the truth of where we came from, Russell. And I think that's a big question that needs to be answered. And once I found Sitchin's theory, and I read all of his books, and they're very, very difficult to read. And actually, I had a 10-year relationship with Sitchin on the phone and in person and in letters. I think that his theory is the correct theory, and I don't think that there's a database any larger than the cuneiform tablets and the cylinder seals that have been found in the Sumerian civilization that he revealed to us. I mean, it's amazing that someone finally figured out who the Sumerians were, where they came from, and what happened to them. Nobody before in history of archaeology or anthropology has been able to figure out where the Sumerians came from. All of a sudden, 6,000 years ago, they appear, and they have writing, and they have music, and they have literature and religion. And they said everything they had was given to them by this race called the Anunnaki. And I think that the cylinder seals are probably the most beautiful evidence of technology transfer. Are you familiar with the cylinder seals?
No.
Cylinder seals about the size of a wine bottle cork, maybe a little smaller. It's made out of hematite. Hematite is a stone that is as hard as steel. And on the smooth cylinder surface of these cylinder seals were engraved in the negative pictures, so that when you rolled this little stone seal over wet clay, it made a positive image. And these images are in the British Museum. There's over 3,000 of the cylinder seals, and the British Museum has 120,000 cuneiform tablets, which they pilfered from the sands of Iraq. They really belong to that country. It's their history. But it's actually the story of the Sumerian civilization, who had high-rise buildings. They had streets laid out in perfect squares and writing, and they left the cylinder seals and the high-rise buildings, and it was amazing civilization. They had all the first. They had the wheel, as I said, astronomy, astrology, religion, writing. And nobody's really ever explained how hunter-gatherers, farmers more or less, came into all of these technological firsts 6,000 years ago. And I think we owe a great debt of gratitude to Zecharia Sitchin for uncovering and translating and revealing to us the history of the Sumerians, which was a civilization that apparently coexisted, lived side by side with the Anunnaki, which was an extraterrestrial species that came to this planet according to their records. And they had a personal relationship. My second book, Gilgamesh 10, I portray what it was like, Russell, 4,600 years ago, to be living in Uruk, which was the capital city of Sumer, and have these advanced beings in your presence. It's quite a fascinating story. In fact, the Epic of Gilgamesh is the first story ever recorded on this planet, and it's written on 12 cuneiform tablets, and it tells the story of a misfit king. He was a hybrid. His mother was an Anunnaki queen, and his father was human. Therefore, he was a bicameral species. He was part human, part Anunnaki, and he was about 9 feet tall like they were. And he's rattling around in this place that they made him the king of called Uruk. In fact, it's the first action hero story, since it was the first story, that tells of his adventures seeking immortality. It's a fascinating story. You should read it.
I'm going to disagree with you about the nationalization of antiquities. I think that leads to things like what happened with Zawi Hawass in Egypt. Antiquities should belong to all people of the earth.
I agree. I agree with that. I think that the British Museum and all the other countries, the Germans and even other museums, should return the artifacts to the country of the origin. They belong to those people. They don't belong in museums of other countries. I agree.
Gold is extremely rare throughout the universe and can only be created as a byproduct of catastrophic cosmic events such as the collision of two neutron stars. When these two massive heavenly bodies collide, they emit gamma-ray bursts that spew out this newly formed gold, and we are left to chip it out of the rock and sift it from the waters. You can't turn lead into gold, and it can't be made synthetically. So gold is precious stuff, but why was it precious to the Anunnaki?
Okay, according to the stories, now this is all information that comes from the translation of the cuneiform tablets. In other words, they wrote that the Anunnaki came to this planet 400,000 years ago in the pursuit of gold because their planet, which is the 10th planet in our solar system, I believe, was losing its atmosphere. They had created a gigantic ozone leak in their atmosphere, and if you take a planet that goes so far from the sun as theirs does, you need your atmosphere to preserve life in all its forms. So the only thing that they found, apparently, to seal up to heal up the ozone leak were powdered flakes of gold. And they didn't have much gold on their planet, so they sought in the solar system that they were captured into a planet that had the gold, and they found Earth had it. So they came here to extract the gold and take it back to their home planet and powder it and inject it into the ozone layer of their atmosphere to reflect the sun out and heal the loss of their atmosphere. It was a survival plan, actually. They were destined to be doomed if they couldn't close their ozone leak. They tried, according to the cuneiform stories, many different methods to seal up the ozone leak, but none of them worked. And finally, gold did work, and gold apparently has that ability. We use it in our space program. Our astronauts' helmet visors are coated with gold. The satellites we put up have gold protection because it reflects the sun's rays, and it apparently has some protection against gamma radiation. It has many properties, and as I say, it's 19 times heavier than water, so that it can be precipitated out by washboarding it.
Is there any actual proof of the Anunnaki coming back to our planet?
No.
No.
I don't know of any proof of that, but I do know that there was a recent, very fascinating Russian documentary film. I don't know if you saw that or not, but it tells the story of the Antarctic expedition led by Admiral Byrd in 1947 to try to destroy what they thought was a secret Nazi underwater base in Antarctica. And this was 4,700 troops, many ships, an aircraft carrier, a couple of submarines and airplanes that went down to the Antarctic and were repelled by UFOs. They were attacked by UFOs. And the Russian documentary quotes, from the KGB files. It was covered up in this country, and Admiral Byrd wasn't allowed to talk about it, but he did say that the weapons that were used against them were impossible to defend against, and so they retreated. The whole thing turned around and they left. And the story of an attack by UFO-type vessels from the Antarctic base, and also the connection between the Nazis and maybe they had contact with the Anunnaki because their weapon systems were so far advanced from the rest of us, everybody wondered where the hell they got that technology from. So it's possible to me, Russell, that the Nazis had connected with the Anunnaki and that there was this underwater base in the Antarctic and that we were attacked by these UFOs to repel us. They didn't want to destroy us. They could have destroyed us if they wanted to, but they just turned us around. And that's been verified. I've checked the records of our side of the story, and it coincides with what the Russians are saying in this documentary film. It's a fascinating story. I can read you one quote. The thing shot vertically out of the water at tremendous velocity. This is one of the guys. It shot down a Chinook that took off a few minutes later in an unknown type of ray from the object, almost instantly crashed into the sea near our vessel. About 10 miles away, one of our boats burst into flame and began to sink. Having personally witnessed this attack by the object that flew out of the sea, all I can say is it was frightening. This is a direct quote from one of our naval personnel. It's in there. I mean, it's a story that apparently has been covered up by our government, but there are bits and pieces of it around, and apparently the KGB had all the information, and they released it in this documentary film. It's amazing. It's just incredible how this information is coming out. I think there's a kind of a concerted effort now by other governments other than our own to try to bring forward the reality, the disclosure, as it were, of alien contact.
There's a film being put out about your last book by Kevin Flint.
Yes, he's my filmographer. It's a documentary that he and I are making together. The first 6 minutes of it is posted on my webpage.
Well, if the Anunnaki were here, are they still here? And if they aren't, where did they go?
Yeah, I think they're still in that base under the Antarctic. And I've been researching who might be in command. You know, the question that Sitchin and I asked him, I said, if they come back, what's going to happen? He says, it depends on who's in command. As you may have or may not know, or your audience may and may not know, there were two factions. There was the Little faction and the Enki faction. And according to the story of the Great Flood, Enki was the leader who saved humanity from the flood. And Enlil really didn't care about us and was willing to let us all be killed. So that was the question that Zecharia and I kicked back and forth. He said, it depends on who's in command when they come back. But I've now found new research, Russell, that one of the leaders, who was the son of Enki, his name was Marduk. And I don't think Marduk was eventually made commander of Earth. He was in control of the Earth. And he was the firstborn son of Enki, and Enki was the firstborn son of Anu, who was the king of the Anunnaki. And there was a squabble about who was going to have the rights to succession. And Marduk always thought that his father should be, but there's another story that I won't go into right now. Anyway, I think Marduk is still here, and I think he was based in the Antarctic when this attack took place that's revealed by the Russian documentary. And the reason I think Marduk was the one that was in command is that he, through all the stories that were translated from the cuneiform tablets, was the arch enemy of Enlil. And there's some speculation and perhaps proof that Enlil was Yahweh, the God of the Hebrews. And if that's true, and this enmity existed between Marduk and Enlil, and he helped the Nazis' main historical event was the Holocaust, where 6 million Hebrews or Jews were killed. And if he aided in that, that would fit the format of his war against Enlil. It's a fascinating story. I'm not saying that's proven by any means, Russell. What I'm saying is I'm speculating that if there was an Anunnaki leader who remained on Earth and was submerged under the Antarctic with this base and had UFO fighters, which were exhibited in this Russian documentary, then he might have been conspiring with the Nazis and helping them with their technology, because they obviously had weapons that were far more advanced than ours, the V-2 rockets and the ones that were direct rocket attacks on London were much more advanced than anything we ever had. And they also have research that they were working on flying saucers. The Nazis had technology developing their own flying saucers. And where did they get that technology from? My guess is that the advanced species like the Anunnaki who had the technology were maybe transferring some of it to this regime.
Do you spend any time whatsoever attempting to debunk this stuff?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. In fact, my first book, Adam the Missing Link, was started to write to try to disprove Sitchin. And when I finished the book, I became a devotee. I became a disciple. I figured out that all the things that I had questioned were proven. I try to prove and find other resources that could corroborate what I'm saying. I don't debunk things as a conspiracy theory. I'm not into that.
There's a great website out there, ancientaliensdebunked.com. And I'll quote Zecharia Sitchin. In the ancient texts of Sumeria, we have descriptions of these being descended from the sky called the Anunnaki. The term Anunnaki means those who from heavens came.
Heaven to earth came.
AncientAliensDebunked.com says, this is entirely wrong. The word Anunnaki means princely seed or princely blood. The idea is that the Anunnaki were direct creations of Anu, who is regarded as the father and king of the gods. Your thoughts on that?
I think there are several sites that have tried to debunk Sitchin because they don't have anything positive on their own to report. I have no quarrel with people who would wish to challenge the theory of Sitchin. All I'm saying is that since he's no longer with us, I've taken up the torch and I'm defending what he said as being very accurate, and that the vast body of people who were in our field, ufologists, agree that Sitchin was on the money, that his translations were so incredible. There were, of the 300,000 cuneiform tablets that have been found, Russell, 2,000 of them have scientific information in them. And those are the ones that he translated and put into book form. And if you were to ever pick up a copy of The Lost Book of Enki by Zecharia Sitchin, you will see direct translations from the cuneiform tablets of the story of the Anunnaki. It's a fascinating story. It goes way back to what was going on in their home planet. And frankly, the question that Sitchin and I often bantered about was who created the Anunnaki? You know, they had a deity, according to the writings in the cuneiform tablets. Their deity was called the creator of all. And if they were, say, 1 million years more advanced than we were, and they still didn't answer the question, you know, they couldn't answer the final question, where the hell did life come from? I'll tell you an interesting story. When I was 19 years old, in 1950, I had a professor at Caltech who was my chemistry professor. His name was Linus Pauling. And I asked the doctor if he believed in God. And he said, Klarfeld, our discipline is to explain everything in the universe back to the beginning of time, the Big Bang. If you were to ask me what there was a millisecond before the Big Bang, we don't know. If you want to believe in God, please do, because we don't have the answer of where the universe came from. Now, I think any advanced civilization, like the Anunnaki, for instance, would have the same question. They don't know the answer to that. And if they have a deity called the creator of all, it's obvious to me that there are still some unanswered questions that you and I can talk about, but I don't think we'll ever get an answer to.
What is Nibiru, and does it have anything to do with the now dead comet Ison?
No, the comets were formed when Nibiru was a planet that was expelled from another star system. It was free-floating in space and was captured by the gravitational field put out by our solar system at the farthest large planet, which was Neptune. It came in clockwise or retrograde into our solar system, and that was maybe 3 or 4 billion years ago. And it hit one of its moons when it came through the center of our solar system, which was between Jupiter and Mars. Its moon whacked a fourth planet, which was called Tiamat, which was a water planet, and it cut it in half. The result went clockwise. The debris would be of the half of the Tiamat that was destroyed by this impact became the asteroid belt and the comets. And they circulate around the sun in a clockwise fashion. Everything else, all the planets are counterclockwise around our sun. But here we have a body of comets that go clockwise, and Nibiru goes clockwise, and it's, according to the translations, has a 3,600-year orbit. Comes back every 3,600 years, and it's been recorded by past civilizations. There are written records of this thing in the sky that caused all kinds of problems when it came in between Jupiter and Mars because of its gravitational forces on Earth. In fact, the Greeks called it Nemesis, described what its problem was. The Romans never recorded it. It's the only civilization that could have recorded it, but they did talk about the Star of Bethlehem, and nobody's ever really analyzed what the Star of Bethlehem was. I think it was the passing of Nibiru, which happened at around birth of Christ, the year 30 BC or 0. So if indeed that's the orbital time frame, we've got about another 1,500 or 1,600 years before it comes back into our inner planet.
Nibiru won't be here in anyone's lifetime.
No, not yours, not mine, unless we become immortal.
Which is possible with this Avatar 2045 project.
Yes, there are certain experiments going on in Berkeley right now where they're dealing with worms. I don't know if you've heard about that. They've genetically engineered a worm species where this doctor who did it, she claims she turned off the Grim Reaper gene on one set of worms, and they live 5 times longer than the other worms. And if you extrapolate that into humans, that means if we could find the Grim Reaper gene and turn it off in our system, we could live to be 500 years. The Bible tells us of humans that live 900 years. And so there has to be some correlation between these stories and what's real and what isn't real, Russell.
The idea that ancient people were too primitive to have accomplished some of these great things, such as the pyramids, is this ancient aliens' view of history racist? And if not racist, disrespectful to the accomplishments and intelligence of our ancestors?
No, I don't think so. I think that the theory of technology transfer can be traced in the history of our species, the Homo sapiens sapiens. And always when an advanced civilization encounters an aboriginal one, there is this technological transfer that takes place. And if the story of the Sumerians having arrived with all the first, which is impossible, I mean, historically it doesn't happen. People don't come out of the caves and start writing music and talk about astronomy and astrology, mathematics and the wheel. This Sumerian civilization, I think, was the first recorded advanced civilization that apparently had 15 or 16 of the first discoveries of advanced civilization on the planet. And they admitted that they didn't do it themselves, that they were given this technology by the Anunnaki. So I tend to agree that the Neolithic tribes and civilizations that we know about that were predecessors to Homo sapiens, we have a species called Homo erectus. And Homo erectus was evolving on this planet as a creature, looked like us, it stood up, walked around on 2 legs, had advanced in 1,800,000 years to the tool-making proficiency of wooden spears and stones. Now ask yourself this question. Homo sapiens were discovered, our species, in Southeast Africa exactly where they said they did it, 200,000 years ago. And that's a very short time frame, 200,000 years, Russell, in the evolutionary scheme of things. And we're walking on the moon in 1969. You can't really explain that through evolution. It wouldn't have happened. We had to have something special going on in our genetic code to enable us to develop tools that were advanced so rapidly in 200,000 years that we were technically able to leave this planet, become semi-space age civilization, and walk on the moon. So were the early Neanderthals and the farmers and hunter-gatherers capable of building the pyramids? No. In my estimation, they didn't have the tools and the knowledge. Now, they might have helped an advanced civilization do it. I'm going to be quoting in my next book, the fourth book, which will be out early next spring, from the cuneiform tablets, how the pyramids were built, who built them, and who built the Sphinx. Now, we've had certain researchers recently who have studied the Sphinx, and they found water erosion. Are you familiar with that story?
Yes.
Okay, and they placed that time frame of the Sphinx back 10,500 years ago. There's also a body of knowledge by Robert Bauval that the Orion Belt is a simulation of the pyramids. The pyramids were a simulation of the Orion Belt, and you turn the clock backwards on the exact formation there, you come to the year 10,500 BC. If both of these scientific research projects are true, there were no Egyptians 10,500 years ago, Russell. That was a desert with nomads and hunter-gatherers roaming around there. There was no civilization. The Egyptian civilization didn't come until 300 years after the Sumerians, and that's only 6,000 years ago. So you tell me, how could that be?
Right. Well, we don't know if it's true.
I'm an engineer and I'm a tire kicker, Russell. I need to have physical evidence. That's why I'm going to pursue my theory with physical proof. In the next book, I will bring forward physical proof, and also I will start traveling to the various sites where I claim they were gold mining operations, and I will physically attempt to prove that that's true. My whole modus operandi right now, Russell, is to prove that there was this ET civilization, the Anunnaki, here on this planet. It might not have been the only ET visitors to this planet. I mean, we're kind of like a 7-Eleven. Everybody stops in to take a look. But the only ones that left a robust database, 300,000 cuneiform tablets and thousands of cylinder seals that recorded their history and what they did and have lasted. You know, we don't have any technology, Russell, that's going to last more than 100 or 200 years, much less 1,000 years.
No, it's true. If there were a great cataclysm tomorrow or today, there wouldn't be much left of us in a couple thousand years.
That's right. We have no means of preserving our history. Apparently, the Anunnaki did. The cylinder seals and the cuneiform tablets are a record that comes to us from 6,000 years ago, intact. They're to be studied, they're to be analyzed, they're to be learned from what they knew, what they were trying to do, and what they did do.
Why would they be so cryptic? It seems to me that they would be a little more precise and less vague if they were trying to pass on information.
Well, they did. They were detailed how they created Adam. The story in the cuneiform tablets spells out exactly how they did it. They created a bicameral species by taking the egg from the female Homo erectus, scooping out the nucleus, putting their DNA in it, and planting it into one of their birth mothers, an Anunnaki birth mother, and there's a cylinder seal that depicts this creation, produced Adam. They called it Adamu, the first human. And so they gave detailed information. We're doing it today. In other words, women who were infertile receive this same transplantation, and they get children. But when you take a bicameral result, like if Adam was a bicameral species, he was part Homo erectus and he had DNA of the Anunnaki, they couldn't reproduce themselves. No, it's Adam and Eve could not reproduce children. They were infertile. So another experiment was done, and that's explained in great detail in the cuneiform tablets also, of how Adam's rib was somehow manipulated to make Eve fertile. For instance, if you cross a horse and a donkey, you get a mule, right? And a mule can't reproduce itself. It's sterile. So that's what Adam and Eve were. And then they had to produce another procedure, which they described in great detail in the cuneiform tablets, of how they made Eve fertile so that she could reproduce with Adam, Homo sapiens. Now, the first species was Homo sapiens. Later on, there came another species, which you and I are. It's called Homo sapiens sapien. That occurred by one of the Anunnaki lords, his name was Enki, directly impregnating two human females. And that caused a greater transfer of their DNA than the original experiment did. In other words, we originally were created as primitive workers, according to the cuneiform stories, and weren't quite as smart as Homo sapiens sapiens. So, I mean, the story is there. The details are there. The information is there. All it needs to do is get a wider attention and let people make up their own minds. I'm not telling people what they should believe and what they shouldn't believe. I'm saying just examine the facts and make up your own mind.
How has your fascinating view of history affected your personal life? Do people know who you are, where you live? Do little children snicker about crazy old man Klarfeld? Are there whispers in the grocery aisles?
Oh, yeah. I've been called a woo-woo, and I don't care. I mean, people who have lived in this box and not been able to think outside of it are fine. I don't have any questions or quarrels with them. It's rejuvenated my third career, as you probably can guess from the dates that I've given you, kind of a super senior. Yet I'm in the third career of my life, and I'm excited, and I'm exploring, and I'm discovering new things. And I think that I'm hopefully able to contribute somewhat to the dialogue. After all, this is just a huge dialogue between people about what happened. And I think that I'm not a preacher. I don't try to convince people that my story is true. I just say, please examine these facts and make up your own mind, because I think the facts speak for themselves.
Well, you've written several books. You've got a new one coming out in the spring. Where can people pick up your books and learn more about you?
I have a website called www.adamthemissinglink.com. It's the title of the first book. 3Ws.adamthemissinglink.com. There's 2 pages. First page tells a little bit about me, and it also allows them to view the first 6 minutes of that documentary film we talked about. The second page has 3 books on it now, and it explains what each book is and how it can be acquired in many forms, hard copies, ebooks, even on Kindle.
And when's the movie coming out? I have to admit the trailer looks pretty good.
Okay, thank you. Well, we're working hopefully to get Leonard Nimoy to be our narrator. And we're raising money now. I've got 2 contacts that we need to fund the balance of it. And then we have another project where the second book was written in a screenplay format, Russell. It's called Gilgamesh 10, which is the story of the first action hero. And we're actually working with some folks right now, a producer, to make it into a major film. So those are 2 projects, the documentary film and the Gilgamesh trilogy. It'll be kind of like Star Wars, as a 3-movie trilogy, with the first one being the story of Gilgamesh. I have ambitions. I challenge myself with impossible goals, and that's how I keep going. It self-renews me.
One last question. Sergei Baranov asked me this, and he's a columnist for the Intel Hub. Did you learn about the Anunnaki from Sitchin and take it from there, or did you find out about it elsewhere on your own?
That's a good question. No, I didn't. I was pursuing other avenues when I think it was 1996 or 7, I discovered 12th Planet by Zecharia. And once I read that, I called him up on the phone, and we started this 10-year relationship. He had opened the door for me to answer the final question that I couldn't put together on my own. No, I did not discover the Anunnaki on my own. I discovered it through Sitchin.
Marshall Klarfeld, absolutely great having you on the show today. Really enjoyed it.
Well, I hope that you will pursue your own ideas about, you're a very smart young man, and you probably running into the questions that I ran into when I was your age. And you need to find answers, and that's all I'm doing. I'm just trying to satisfy the questions that keep popping up in my mind. What was this? How did it work? Why was it built? What were the reasons, and how did they do it? Those are all the questions that I try to get answers to. It's been a pleasure talking with you, Russell, and good luck to you.